Welcome back to Shifting Overthinking to Marketing Movement, a limited audio series for creative, equity-led solopreneurs with a story and expertise to share. This gets you out of your own head to find clarity and direction so you can build sustainable marketing processes that fit your body, brain, and capacity. This episode is my bread and butter. This is taking a big picture view of how all of your content fits together. So a lot of folks know to post it on, in their stories or on threads, whatever that platform is for you. And while when we're at low capacity, I feel like that is helpful to keep momentum flowing and your ideas, out into the world. You can decide to work more sequentially. And like the messaging as soil metaphor that we've used before, what you decide to build first can make everything that comes afterward not only easier because you laid the groundwork for it, but just also in general more effective. You can be more intentional with what actions you want folks to take because you already know the next step. You know where it leads. You've already built that aspect. And one thing I do want to iterate to folks before we get started is that not all content is created equal. Different content has different purposes. And while this feels like common sense and even, I dare say, it may be intuitive, I feel like this is what often leads folks to give up on their marketing because they're expecting a particular type of content, like let's say social media, to do something that it is not designed for. I'll use Reels as an example. While some people will talk about how, they're signing clients directly from Reels, let me be clear, I believe that does happen, but I feel like it has to be so rare. In my mind, it says more about the person who received the message, right? Like we talked about last episode, and their readiness to commit or take action than the content itself. Look, we already spoke about this. The right content can hit somebody at the exact right time. And this has happened to me with people either Googling something about me or they watched a couple of my YouTube videos or they booked a call. And I want to be very clear, I am always so grateful when that happens. But I also don't expect it from that type of content. Let me at least just say right off the bat, do not beat yourself up if you post content like long form or social media or whatnot, and it doesn't instantly lead to inquiries. You cannot weigh your success of your content based on using it as a sales tool because it's just not designed for that. Going back to the Reels example, that's more of a tool for discovery, right? It's meant to go out to people who do not already follow you, and that is their purpose. So you have to weigh the success based on, are more people finding out about me and sticking around and engaging with me? For a lot of us, again, going back to some of us low capacity entrepreneurs, the requirement, like the labor up front, the energy requirement to make that work just may be too high for us to be willing to pay. And that's also perfectly okay. When you're devising a marketing strategy, either on your own or in collaboration with somebody like me, there are 3 questions to answer. How will new people discover me? How will I build the relationship with folks who are still considering who they want to work with? And how will I share the next steps for working together to the people who have signaled that they are ready? I feel like one exception that kind of proves the rule with this is your website, because it kind of serves as that content hub and should have pages for all of those purposes. And of course, the homepage that it's going to have to kind of hit people in all of those different stages, which is kind of what makes, creating a homepage so tricky, is because it has to serve a lot of different purposes in a very small amount of space. This ties into the overthinking that we've been discussing because of the way platform or format specific marketers, whether intentionally or not, they can make us feel like we have to choose that silver bullet, one type of content that will satisfy all of these different purposes. And this is what gets us stuck. We keep searching for an all-in-one solution or strategy. And because that doesn't fully exist, we end up refusing to commit to one or to trying something out for a little while and just letting that ongoing content build on itself. Or we hold each piece of content that we create to an impossible standard that makes us want to give up. So the action step for this section is look at what you're currently sharing or creating, if anything, right? You may not be ready or have taken a pause from it, that's fine as well. We'll definitely talk about the minimum levels of promotion towards like around the end of the series. So if you're not in a place to commit to bigger projects, that's okay. But I will say, engaging in people who follow you stories or commenting on other people's threads, that counts. Engaging in like intentional community building definitely counts. But we do want to be realistic with the purpose of what we're currently doing. So out of these questions, the 3 questions that I said earlier, which one are you currently doing? Or if multiple, you're ahead of the class on that. But which one of these 3 questions are you currently overthinking the most? So definitely kind of take some time, pause this if you need to, write that kind of stuff down. So how I prioritize content, as far as which ones to build, I work backwards. And I know that, like, again, we're talking about like what feels maybe like massive undertakings, and this can feel really underwhelming. You know, it's like I'm asking you to create 3 whole different types of content every single week. But that's not what I'm asking. That's not what I'm saying. This is really just to illustrate how that content ecosystem will look at a high level. You are not expected to do all of these things at once. In fact, I would not. I'm not doing all of those things all at once. I would argue that even able-bodied, neurotypical, child-free, no obligation people who don't have the constraints that, you know, that I do, can't implement all of those things all at once anyway. Which is where the roadmap comes in, right? We talked about that as the companion resource in the very beginning in the introduction. I hope you have it downloaded. If not, I will drop the link again in the show notes. Software companies, and I know some software companies are very icky, but this is one thing that I can kind of agree with. Software companies use a roadmap to prioritize which features they want to add. So features with a bigger impact on like the user experience or that people have been asking for, those come first. And they're usually the bigger impact ones need to be in place before some of the smaller or lower priority features that will come later. So this is a concept we can bring to our businesses and to our marketing and sales systems. This is why I always start with messaging, because this is really the biggest project that has like that ripple effect throughout everything else that we do. It makes everything else that comes after it, every touch point, every like video or podcast or social, it makes everything like distinctive to our unique perspective and consistent. Even if the frequency isn't always as consistent as maybe we would hope or expect it to be. We're actually going to come back to that messaging as we look at our content ecosystem. You know, in the last episodes, we clarified what our unique differentiators are, but I want us to kind of go a step further. Can you explain your unique approach to the work that you do? You can call it your framework, your process, your methodology. It can be one that you've developed yourself or a blend of others that you've either trained under or that you incorporate. The first part of your content ecosystem that you should prioritize, if you haven't already done this, is to have pieces that explain the process that you take clients through. If you think you don't have a process, it wasn't until I started noticing the steps that I did with clients and I started writing these things down that I realized that I do have stages and systems that I go through to ensure that I'm not missing anything. You know, we talked maybe about some of these things as you were free writing your unique differentiators when we were talking about your certifications and your trainings. Take note of the patterns that you see with your clients, the problems that they face, how you address them or tailor your approach. You'll be surprised. You have a process. You just may not have articulated it yet, which is often what I help folks with as we go through Story Spark Connection. There are several ways that you can represent your process. You can have a dedicated page on your website. I will link mine in the show notes just so you can see what one looks like. You can have like a signature workshop. It doesn't have to be an in-depth like it doesn't have to be a full-on course necessarily. I mean, you can have one if you want, but you can just kind of have a high-level overview of your process as like a 30, 45-minute, 60-minute workshop. There can be a pinned post on your Instagram, or the equivalent would be like a featured post on LinkedIn. You could have like a video series or private podcast. Capabilities deck that you maybe send to referrals or with proposals that helps kind of outline your methodology. One thing that I think we should all have, at least to some degree, is some sort of visual representations or elements, maybe in infographic form. It doesn't have to be, I've kind of been sprinkling those in the show notes when they're relevant because I can keep using those visuals. So why are these important? We've kind of started to already talk a little bit about this, but from the software example from earlier, when you have these in place, they serve several different purposes. You can send some of these to people who are looking to work with you to help them decide if your approach is a good fit for them. Again, it's just an easy way to explain that to folks. I include a section on my framework on each of my sales pages for this purpose. Again, just very high level summary. The more comprehensive pieces of content, again, you don't have to do these right away, but some of these things that are a little more fleshed out, like a workshop or a video series, can be repurposed into smaller chunks. So creating the things like the visuals, like I said, is especially can be used over and over. As you define your own process, you develop that unique spin that we discussed last episode on your nurture content. So as you're kind of deciding how to explain your framework, this gives you angles on how to approach your discovery content. Like if you're deciding to do guest teaching or podcasts or speaking, because you've already started to flesh that out. I would I keep going back to this, but if messaging is that soil, I would say the assets that explain your approach are the seeds that will continue to grow as you work your way through your roadmap. So for this action step, choose one of the above in those list of approach assets to create in the next week or two. It can be as comprehensive or as simple as it needs to be, or as your capacity allows. I mentioned visual elements because often when I was struggling to define some of my own processes, like in written form, even though I am a writer, I found that opening Canva or sketching like in a notebook or what have you, it made my brain think differently about it when I was stuck on how to explain it to someone else. There's also, not everybody processes things in written fashion. So having another visual component will help people who are that kind of processor. Let's say, maybe you're not quite there yet. Maybe you're still in the beginning stages of defining this for yourself. I say it doesn't have to be something that you can even have to share with anyone yet. It can be you whiteboarding or a mind map or sticky notes that you're kind of defining this for yourself and just using this time and this space as a way to just think through this and to see where the patterns are for yourself. We'll talk more about the sales process in the next episode because I feel like after the framework design, this is the next logical step on the roadmap. And it's, at least for me, maybe the biggest overthinking block that us folks that care about our people deal with. In closing, make meaningful progress in your business by shifting out of overthinking, clarifying your priorities that match your capacity and values so that you can move forward in your marketing. I'll see you in the next one.